All right, second hour of Clay and Buck kicks off right now. Thank you for being here with us from all across the country. As we mentioned, fellow conservative personality, podcaster, Steven Crowder has broken he's broken news here with a part of the Nashville Covenant School shooter manifesto. If we all remember back earlier in the year, there was this horrific mass shooting, mass casualty attack, where children were killed by this self-identified transgender terrorist. And we have gone through many, many months now of saying, where is the manifesto? We know law enforcement said there was a manifesto, and at one point we're even saying they were going to release the manifesto. Other shooters, other terrorists, other deranged mass murderers with manifestos have had them released. This is standard operating procedure for law enforcement. The public right to know is thought to outweigh the additional hurt and emotional turmoil that would come from the release of these things. Not in this case, though. And we have been saying all along that it seems like that is clearly political, and this is meant to be a case where they won't release something and hold it as long as they, or at least hold it as long as they possibly can, so that there won't be any political consequences, say, for the ideology or for any politicians who are espousing rhetoric or taking positions that may have in some way influenced this school shooter. And now we have some of these pages, Clay, and it's 3 pages of what I believe is a much longer manifesto, and we credit Louder with Crowder for this. Here, I mean, I don't want to read all of it. I mean, the basics are things like, quote, here's a quote, want to kill all you little crackers is the term she uses here. I hope I have a high death count. I'm ready. I hope my victims aren't. I'm ready to die. I'm a little nervous but excited. Been excited for the past few weeks. I can't believe it's here. Don't know how I was able to get this far, but I am. I'm ready. I hope my victims aren't. My only fear is if anything goes wrong, I'll do my best to prevent. So basically, this is the pages we have show a hatred of white children, white privilege, crackers, obviously derogatory term used for white people. And this trans terrorist was obsessed, Clay, with a narrative of anti-whiteness and anti-white privilege as part. Now, this is just a fragment. This is just a few pages of a much longer manifesto. But this was a left-wing terrorist politically who was motivated by anti-whiteness, at least in part, based on this manifesto.
Listen to this, Buck. And I, again, it's going to be, and I know, I'm from Nashville, and I know a lot of the families that are impacted here. My kids go to school with a lot of the brothers and sisters who went to this school, so this strikes very close to home here. But here is another page of what she wrote on what she dates as February 3rd, 2023. Kill those kids, those crackers, going to private fancy schools with those fancy khakis and sports backpacks, with their mommies and daddies Mustangs and convertibles. F you little S. I wish to shoot you weak ass with your mop yellow hair. Want to kill all you little crackers. Bunch of little gay slur with your white privilege. F you F word. I think I didn't commit any FCC violations there, but this is one of the pages that's out there. I have been told that there are many pages like this. And we have been saying on this show that this should have been out a long time ago. And, I mean, the itemized of what she calls the death day and how specific she was in her attack.
There's more of a focus here, Clay, on a deranged anti-whiteness, and some of the rhetoric that you're hearing here is something more along the lines of what you would hear at a left-wing anti-cop and anti-police rally. A lot of focus on whiteness and a racial angle to this stuff. There may be a lot more about the transgender opposition or any of that, but for right now, it seems like, and we're clearly talking about a deranged individual, as deranged as one can get, and she was killed by an officer who responded heroically to the scene. But when you're trying to get a sense as to, what may have ideologically, what may be some of the threads that were involved in the thinking of this clearly very sick person, only a truly deranged, evil, and sick person can go and shoot, a bunch of people, period, but children certainly. There is a left-wing fixation on white privilege and whiteness as, let's just be honest, Joe Biden says that, effectively, white supremacy is the biggest threat to the nation. And this is the biggest concern that is out there for some people on the left, this concept of whiteness and the oppression from it and all the rest of it. And that maniacal focus can have consequences and can influence people who are already beyond the edge, perhaps. But the rhetoric is damaging. And if this were a different kind of manifesto, we know we would have been talking for months earlier about whatever rhetoric was involved.
If any other race had been targeted with what I read to you, it would have been the number one story for weeks. And we would have to have a national conversation about how such a thing could happen. I want to remind everybody, again, this is my hometown. Joe Biden never came to Nashville. Joe Biden went to Lewiston, Maine. Joe Biden went to Buffalo. Joe Biden went to Uvalde. Never came to Nashville. They have known, the FBI, by the way, we should say, has declined comment on the release of these pages from her manifesto. Joe Biden knew what was in this manifesto. When you immediately saw that he didn't show up in Nashville, let me just tell it to you this way. If this had been someone who wrote the same page about wanting to kill black people or Hispanic people, do you think Joe Biden would have come to Nashville? He would have been here within the day. Certainly would have been there within 24 hours. He never came. Now, Jill Biden, his wife, came. But understand the way the narrative gets created. They knew almost instantaneously inside of the Biden White House, this is a trans shooter, crazy, as almost all shooters are, crazy and motivated by hate against white people. And I am told there is writings dealing with the trans agenda. I'm also told, Buck, that one reason she scouted schools, and one reason she went to Covenant was because there was not a substantial police presence there of security.
Armed security, yeah.
Yes. That's a huge part of this story, too. Why did Joe Biden not go to Nashville? And why, I bet, will you not see this covered? This is not going to, I would bet, maybe I'll be wrong. I bet this isn't going to be on the front page of the New York Times tomorrow. I bet it's not going to be on the front page of the Washington Post.
The Democrat Party refuses to ever acknowledge that pathological anti-whiteness and the obsession with white privilege and the exaggerated fear of white supremacy and even white nationalist terrorists and all the things they talk about. They will never admit that stuff is, well, first of all, exaggerated, but that also that their cynical political focus on that can have really negative consequences in our society. And they create effectively a bigotry that has no bottom. I mean, you will never be told the stuff you're saying about whiteness is too damaging and too destructive. You can say anything about it. You can say that, whiteness is a genocidal ideology, and you talk about the Native Americans, or, whiteness is horrible. And then you get into a conversation where you say, well, hold on a second. Aren't we judging people by skin color, and aren't we creating, in society, an animosity with that kind of language, that kind of analysis? And the left believes that it is warranted. And they'll say, oh, but what about the white people? Said, well, yes, they think that they separate themselves from that evil of whiteness by decrying it and by, calling out white privilege and all these things that are mandated at all these colleges and universities. Obviously, it doesn't turn everybody into terrorists. We're not saying that it does, but this is toxic ideology, and toxic ideology in the wrong hands, or in the wrong mind, I should say, can have really horrific consequences.
Joe Biden didn't come here. Just factor that in. But what you just said, Jewish people are suddenly finding out too, right? Because this ties in with the idea that Jews were actually the victim of a terror attack. 1,400 innocent Jewish people were murdered, and left-wing ideology dictates that because brown people murdered Jews, there are many people in the United States, particularly of young ages and also of leftist ideology, that refuse to believe that Jews could be victims because they are white. And this ties in, I think, with this shooting that has occurred here as well. And we're sitting at, Buck, this happened in March, if I'm not mistaken. It took 8 months, essentially, for this to actually get out. 3 pages of it.
And it hasn't been verified, as you pointed out, by the FBI. But there was never any, the reasons they gave, they said the families of the victims, didn't want the pages released or something along those lines. That has not stopped other manifestos from being released. Are all the families always asked? And, what is it like they see whoever has the majority. Do you want it released? Do you not want it released? Do you want to know?
It comes out immediately, Buck. If this person had been a Trump-supporting racist, it would have been out within 24 hours, every word, everywhere. It would have been emblazoned on the front page of every newspaper. They would have been leading CNN and MSNBC broadcast with it, talking about the toxicity of white MAGA supporters and how we had needed to have a national conversation about white supremacy. It's an interesting, put a pin in this discussion. Let's see how the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and MSNBC cover this. I give credit to Steven Crowder for putting this out there, because it should have been out 24 hours after the attack. We knew who the killer was. And again, we try not to broadcast killer names on this show because I don't like to make them famous. But these manifestos always get out, and I think it's important to have a discussion about what motivated killer.
And not to take anything away from, Louder with Crowder and the staff there and everything else, but, they're independent creators. New York Times has like 1,000 people working on the payroll. Washington Post has hundreds and hundreds of reporters on the payroll.
Great point.
They could have gotten this, I'm sure. They didn't want it.